What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Facade. This week we are on episode number 99, and so it is getting exciting. We're just 1 week away from the centenary episode. Episode 100, I'm trying to think what should I talk about. So if you guys have any thoughts on what I should cover on episode number 100, please do write in, send me a DM, whatever it is. Last week we were speaking about the invasion on Ukraine and what kind of impact it's going to have on the investment market. And by that I meant, with this inflation spike and all of these different aspects and sentiment kind of getting a bit low in the investment community. That was the general view, and a couple of people have written out and sort of said they found it helpful. So thanks for your comments, guys. If you have any comments, by the way, I should mention that just leave a comment in the YouTube video below, or if you're listening to this on the podcast, just reach out by a DM or something like that, and you can connect with me there. This week, my guest is Shane Fleming. Now, anyone who has been listening to this show for the last sort of 12 months or 24 months, you will have, I usually have kind of a good mix of guests, but in the last couple, in the last, say, month and a half or two, just by accident, it happens to have been all US-based interview guests. And so pretty much just by chance, people have been writing, sort of suggesting that I could come on the show or whatever. And so I said, okay. And so pretty much every guest I've had so far has been a US, in the last couple of episodes anyway, has been a US-based guest. This week, I wanted to bring in an Irish guest. And the funny thing is what we actually have is a little bit of both. We have a guy called Shane Fleming, who is he is an Irish property agent. He's grown up in Ireland. He's done all of his business in Ireland. But during lockdown, he moved to New York City. And he was unable to work in New York City because he didn't have a green card yet. And so he was working in Ireland, using virtual meetings and all of that. Yet he's based in New York City. Now he's going to tell us that story today, along with his background and the usual kind of thing. But Shane also has a popular YouTube channel. And so I'm just going to plug his channel while at the same time plugging mine. So you guys, if you haven't already, please go over to the channel and subscribe to Gavin J. Gallagher. And I should mention that this podcast that you are listening to right now is now uploaded on, it's called Behind the Facade Real Estate Investment, and it is a channel of its own with the entire video interview in video format there. So you can go over and check that out. But listen, it's time to get into the episode, my chat with Mr. Shane Fleming, and without further ado, let's get into the show. You are listening to Behind the Facade, and I am your host, Gavin J. Gallagher. On this podcast, I explore the mental and emotional game often playing out subconsciously, both in your mind and the mind of everyone else in the real estate or property investment market. The key to success in this game is to master your mindset and behavior, to take control of your thoughts, your emotions, and most importantly, your ego. Welcome to the show. Shane Fleming, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Not at all. I'm delighted to have you. So Shane, you're going to be, it's going to be interesting chatting with you because you're an Irish agent and you do Irish business, but you're actually currently based in New York City. Isn't that right?
That is right. I suppose I am an Irish agent. I've worked in Irish real estate for the last 16, 17 years, but for the last year I have been in New York.
Interesting. So we're going to get into all of that. But before we do, can you just take us back to, what actually attracted you to real estate? I mean, what was a young Shane Fleming doing in school and college and things like that kind of brought you into this industry?
Well, I suppose what brought me into the industry, I was very interested in property, perhaps property development from a very young age. There was one or two kind of distant family members that were very involved in construction and development. So I kind of understood a little bit in terms of what they did. Actually, when I look back in terms of my history, my grandfather had a brick factory in Laois. So there was some sort of construction blood there always. So I think it was in my nature to be involved in property and construction. When I was lucky enough to go to a school that offered construction studies and woodwork, and I really excelled at that and was one of my favorite subjects. I was dyslexic, so it kind of, I don't know what it was about it, but it really kind of construction and everything to do with development really attracted me for some reason in terms of the design side of things and spatial awareness. So I was quite good at it as well. So all of that kind of really kind of drove me towards property.
Interesting.
I think I came up in terms of a time in college or in terms of school. I came up pretty much just as the Celtic Tiger was starting to roar, and there was some fantastic developments happening in Ireland and some well-known developers who were really kind of taking the headlines. So when I was a young teenager, that's kind of what was in the media and kind of maybe was a bit impressionable too.
Yeah, that would definitely be an influence. And so what did you actually study in college before you?
So I went and did a degree in property economics. So
is that Bolton Street?
Bolton Street, yeah, I did that for 4 years in Bolton Street. Really enjoyed that, met lots of nice people in my class there. Bolton Street's a strange college. It's like 80% male, but for whatever reason, our class was about 50-50 split. So at least there was a little bit of a balance within the class, but really enjoyed my time there for 4 years. Most of my counterparts within my class went off and worked for agencies like the big four agencies in terms of Savills, CBRE, Jones Lang and all that. That didn't really attract me at the time. I was more interested in the kind of learning about property itself and the development of property and the property business rather than the agency side of business. So I actually, my parents, if my parents ever do listen to this, they probably won't thank me for this, but I do remember them forcing me to go and do interviews with a lot of these big four companies. I remember sitting down at one and they turned around to me halfway through and go, "Do you really actually want the job here?" And I was like, "Not really, no." And they were like, "Why are you here?" And I was like, "Because my dad's given out to me for not going to interviews and I just want to satisfy that." But I was really lucky to, because I think I knew what I wanted to do at that time. And I think I was really lucky that I got a job with Tesco Ireland within their property team, which was involved in actually site acquisitions, planning permissions, developing site out. So they had a site acquisition team, they had a construction team, they had lots of external consultants from engineers and architects. So there was a huge amount of project management. And even though it was retail development, you were getting involved in lots of stuff. Because some of the
construction and all that, yeah.
There were some even residential sites because some sites were so big that the councils would say you have to put some sort of apartment complex on this or housing. So there was a mix of everything.
Wow,
I really learned so much. I would say I probably learned more in my 3 or 4 years in Tesco than I did anywhere else in my career. It was a fantastic, and I'm really glad I made that kind of definite decision when I was that age coming out of college that I didn't want to step into the agency first. I wanted
I think that's a really interesting move. That's the first I've kind of heard of somebody kind of going that route, because I actually, over the years, I've had a lot of sort of dealings with people in the real estate departments and stuff like that of large firms like that have we'll say not a branch network, but have a national presence or whatever, and they're developing in different regions and parts of the country. So interesting. And I mean, what was the transition from that then? Where did you jump into? Was it straight into Shane Fleming?
No, so my initial plan was to stay with Tesco for about 3 years, maybe 4, get chartered. And once I got chartered, the plan was to go out on my own at that stage. So I always had the idea that I was going to go out on my own. What happened then was the crash. I actually saw it coming for a while, but I saw the crash happened. I was like, I'm not jumping into starting up on my own right now. It's not the right time. I left Tesco and went traveling for a few months and came back and worked for IBRC. And I went to go for a job interview, I think for within their NAMA kind of valuations team. But after the interview, they offered me a position in terms of trying to sort out their own property portfolio, which was all the branch network. There was a lot of investment properties that both banks, Nationwide and Anglo, had. So they were trying to figure out what was this, where was it. So there was a huge amount of due diligence for a year or two, and then actually disposing of that. And that was a huge learning curve from a due diligence point of view, which is, as you know, is incredibly important from a property side of things. And I think a lot of people don't quite understand the amount of due diligence that is actually required to be successful in terms of acquisition. So that was a huge learning curve for me. And also because it was a little bit high profile in terms of like the branch network selling, you had to be very kind of sensitive in terms of your job, in terms of what you're doing for probably about a year, because you ultimately knew the branch network was going to be sold, but there was lots of staff and everything else within that branch network, and it was sensitive from a political point of view as well, and under scrutiny. There was a few government information requests sent in, and there was a few different kind of hairy moments in regards to why you made certain decisions. So, but that was a huge learning curve. But I knew that wasn't going to be long term. I knew that was always going to be short term. When I went into that position, it was about just a kind of a stopgap. What I kind of felt to myself was I still wanted to go out on my own. And I think I was getting to a point where I had learned enough from that due diligence side of stuff. I was lucky enough that JLL approached me at that time, and they asked if I'd be interested in moving to JLL. There was one or two people I knew in JLL from my Tesco days, so they had an opening, and they approached me directly. Went there, worked there for a few years.
What department? What JLL department?
I worked within their property management department, but I was mainly kind of looking after kind of more kind of client-facing reporting towards some of the REITs and some of the funds and stuff like that. So it gave me a different exposure to the property side of the business. It was mainly kind of coordinating kind of different property managers, accounts, as well as kind of lettings and all that kind of stuff to make sure that the different clients knew what was happening, and a little bit of tendering work as well for new clients and stuff like that. So that's what I did for a few years there, but I always had to kind of plan to go out on my own. And I think it's nearly 6 years ago I set up Fleming Real Estate.
So just taking it back, so Tesco into IBRC into Jones Lang LaSalle, and then you decided, okay, Shane Fleming, real estate agents, it's time to make this happen. Yeah. What was your mindset at that point? Because obviously getting a paycheck in every month and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of reassuring. And it's, suddenly when you cut that cord, it's all on you. Did you have like clients that you had in mind to approach? Or, I mean, how did you create that, get a bit of momentum just to get started?
I felt that there was a few small things that I'd be able to kind of pick up kind of quickly enough. But I think the biggest motivating factor for me was if I don't try it, I'll never know. And if I don't try it, I will always regret it. So it wasn't coming down to a money factor. It was just like, I don't want to come retirement age.
Wondering, yeah.
I never tried. Like I kind of was weighing up a lot of different things. If I stayed in the industry, stayed in employment, all that kind of thing. And I think I was losing a lot of motivation to stay in that particular industry for my own self. I didn't feel that I wanted to move up the ranks. I didn't feel like when I got to retirement age that I'd really have satisfied a need. So that was one of the most motivating factors. I suppose from a personal point of view as well, I was going through a divorce at the time, or was getting into a divorce. And I was like, well, I'm going through that from a personal point of view. And that's going to be hard to deal with. I want to take the opportunity to, from a professional point of view, do something I really want to do. So there was like, it's now or never, let's just do it now. So there was a few motivating factors, but the main one was, I didn't want to regret not doing it.
Yeah, that's as good a reason as any, and I can totally relate. And so, take us then through the first year or two of Shane Fleming. Like, what did it look like? Was it small start, or did you kind of find your feet quickly?
It was a small enough start at the very start. I was lucky enough and perhaps unlucky enough to land a very big client in McDonald's very quickly after.
Oh wow, that's a big client, yeah.
So that was a blessing, but also maybe perhaps if I look back, a curse. Not that like the work, I still work with them. The work is fine. The work has shifted a little bit, and probably the work I'm doing with them now is something I enjoy a little bit more. But I think from landing a client like that, only a month or two after setting up, I kind of feel that like that gives you a confidence or an arrogance that perhaps is not what you need at that particular point in time. Perhaps you need to be out there on the street trying to dig up as many clients as you possibly can.
So you could have kind of eased back a little, saying, okay, I've got a great client who's going to continually give me work, and therefore I can ease off a little if I want. Yeah,
exactly. I had like one or two things going on. I saw this client coming in that was going to be at least a year or two of guaranteed income. And I felt, okay, well, like as long as other stuff starts slowly coming in, this is all going in the right direction. Whereas if I'm looking back now, I should have built on that momentum and use that momentum to really drive things through, rather than actually just kind of going, oh, well, this is easy. If I can pick them up that easy, everything land on my lap. So I think there was a kind of a mistake made there, definitely from my part, in year one. And then like year two, everything kind of like I doubled my turnover year on year for the first 4 or 5 years. So nice. Everything was going in a good direction. Then COVID hit, and probably things slowed down.
Well, before we jump into COVID, let me just ask, when you started and you're doubling your income year on year, your revenue, did you have a team, or was it just you by yourself? I mean, did you sort of expand your team, and what did that look like?
So from the first few years, it was me. I did outsource a lot of stuff. So I had the mindset of outsourcing as much as I possibly can, from the accountancy side of things, and everything else, from like websites, all the other stuff that I could outsource, I did. And then eventually, as I grew and more got more clients in, I did outsource like a personal assistant. So I did a lot of outsourcing to free up my own time to deal with the client side of things, and all the admin stuff was looked after. So that was my kind of strategy in terms of trying to keep my cost base down rather than taking on someone else.
Fixed costs.
So that again, you learn from all these lessons. Perhaps I probably should have taken people on and tried to grow the business faster with more people. It was probably 2 or 3 years before, maybe 4 years in, before I started even thinking about taking other people on. And then you get into the whole issue of employment and looking at structures and everything else. And a lot of the work I was doing, while I have done some like residential sales and some lettings and stuff like that, a huge amount of that are for people I know or people who've been referred into me. A huge amount of the work that I have done is on the consultancy side, which is like development appraisals, rent reviews, strategic kind of pieces around service charge and that kind of stuff. So that is a huge amount of that is based on my own personal knowledge. So taking someone in who doesn't have that experience or that kind of knowledge is a different task, rather than taking someone in who's just going to focus on the lettings or the residential side, who can just go off and do that. So
you'd be moving into training people and things like that. Yeah,
exactly. So I had looked at options and had looked at different kind of models for that. And I did spend about a year trying to kind of look at the different models and talk to 1 or 2 people here in Ireland, the guys that are doing Keller Williams Ireland. I spoke to them a lot. It didn't work out for whatever reason. It just didn't suit my needs, but it did make sense if I was trying to grow a team, but it just didn't make sense for how my business was. So I kind of decided so there was a lot that I was trying to do. I think what I had kind of discovered was, while I had gone out and deliberately tried to set up my own business for myself and my own brand and all of that kind of stuff, what I had done was I'd just given myself another job. And I was getting to notice that more and more, that I was tied down to a job. I'm tied down to a job, but you are personally responsible for the business and the brand and everything else. So it was like, how do I tie myself, or how do I get myself away from that? Because I don't want to be 65 coming to retirement and go, well, the business I've built is solely based on me. So
you have nothing to sell,
exactly. So in the last kind of 2 years, I suppose I've been thinking about that more and more in regards to making sure in 25 years or 30 years, when I do come to retire, that's not the case.
It's interesting you say that. I've just had a guest on recently, and in fact his episode hasn't aired yet, But he was saying that, funny when you start your own business, you go from working 40 hours a week for somebody else to doing 80 hours a week working for yourself. And it's only when you start to kind of hire good people and put them around you that you can actually start kind of removing yourself from the business and actually start working on the business rather than being in the business.
And I think that's very true. But what I would say is I'm happy to do 80 hours for myself rather than 40 hours for someone else. Hands down, I don't mind. And I'm not talking about the salary differences or anything like that. I just, from a personal point of view, I'd much prefer to be working 80 hours or 100 hours.
People like to steer their own boat, I think. Isn't that it? Yeah. Tell us. And so did COVID then have a dramatic impact on your business?
So luckily enough, I think going back to your original point in terms of hiring staff and looking at staff and growing it that way. Yes, I was starting to gear up to a position where I was going to start doing that. And I was putting structures in place to do that. So when COVID hit, it definitely knocked that kind of targets and plans like out of the water. I was like, I can't do this right now. I don't know what the future is going to be. I can't kind of commit to this right now. But in terms of my actual business, I had a few sales and a few lettings ongoing. Most of them actually went through fine enough. They did take a long time to go through, and there was a little bit of renegotiation, a little bit, but it didn't impact it massively. And because I was doing a lot of consultancy work that was for businesses like McDonald's, I'd also now picked up, or at that stage picked up Circle K and was doing a little bit of work for Circle K. So I was doing kind of ongoing rent reviews and ongoing kind of consultancy work for some professional landlords and corporations. So that didn't disappear. Like, while it became a lot harder to do it over Zoom and doing rent review stuff over Zoom and all that kind of stuff, it did become kind of hard work, and something that should take like 4 to 5 months was taking 9 months to
right.
get done.
Interesting.
So, but in terms of fees, it didn't really hit me in 2020. It didn't grow as much as I wanted it to, but I didn't lose any momentum, if that makes sense.
Okay, interesting. And so I'm curious, at what stage then did the move to New York take place? I think I can remember you posted something on YouTube or something, and you were talking about the fact that you were able to get out of the country after the initial lockdown or whatever, and you went straight to New York or something like that. Tell us about that.
So yeah, so my now wife is from New York. So we'd never planned to come to New York, to be honest with you. We've actually bought a house in Dublin in Portobello, and we've got planning permission for the extension there, and we are at tendering stage now before we're appointing a contractor. But so we are, long term, our plan is to be back in Dublin. But sadly, my wife's mum passed away just as COVID was kind of getting a stronghold. Nothing to do with COVID, but she passed away. So I missed a few important things because I wasn't able to travel. And then when the opportunity to travel came up, we kind of jumped on that and we came over here as quickly as we could. The idea was to only stay for a few months. We were lucky enough to be able to get like a good apartment in East Village. So I'm in East Village right now. And the idea was to stay a few months so my wife could spend a bit more time with her family. Right. Yeah. So, and Ireland was in lockdown. Everyone was working remotely. I was like, sure, I can do this remotely anyway in New York. But the longer we stayed here and the longer lockdown was on in Ireland, we were like, well, we're better off here than we are there. So we decided, well, what can we look at? And we decided we'd apply for a green card here for me.
Interesting.
Once we made that decision, it kind of locked me into having to stay here till I got that green card. Right. And I was not in a position to work until that green card came through as well. So it was a kind of a whole period for me for the last year. Lucky enough, I did get the green card a few weeks ago. So now I'm in a position to talk to you about all these things. I'm now in a position to talk on YouTube because your arms are a bit behind your back in terms of when you're applying for this green card. You're not meant to work. You're not meant to.
So would just on that, would posting a YouTube video be classed as work?
Yeah, so luckily we did have a lawyer, and they kind of like said, as long as you're not looking for business from
Right.
America, you're
So
okay.
that's why the content that you post is a lot of Irish related market sort of posting. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of deliberate, like, so I don't go to a green card interview and they open up a YouTube video and go, here, this is what you said here. Yeah, we're denying
Yeah.
the green card. You've violated they call it probation. You've violated your probation period. So like I was quite conscious and what I posted, and probably definitely my posts on Instagram dropped off all of last year because I was holding back a little bit, and perhaps
Just
holding back.
nervous. Yeah.
Yeah, didn't want to be too out there. Didn't want someone picking up something you said that could be used against you. So that's all behind me now as of a few weeks ago. So I can now start like engaging over here and kind of doing a lot more stuff over here. So we've actually decided we would stay here for probably about a year.
And is the plan to actually do some real estate agency type stuff in New York?
So the plan is, we might come back around to this, but like in terms of the coaching side of stuff, but like I think the plan is I have started because I had to wait for my green card and all that kind of stuff to come through, but I have started to get to do all my hours, my exam, set up my exam for my real estate license. It only takes a few months, or it only takes like 2 or 3 months to get it here in New York, where in Ireland it takes 2 years to get it. So it's a bit of a quicker process. I have met with other agencies and brokerages to talk about kind of how we can work together between Ireland and New York. So I have a few things there in the pipeline and a few options for me to kind of consider once the license goes through. But I'm looking at other things as well. From like the training course, but also mainly kind of an Irish connection with New York and a New York connection with Ireland. I'm trying to kind of develop a kind of a connection there and see how, from a property point of view, and see how investors benefit from both. Yeah.
Yeah. So investors could, if they wanted, invest in and use you as the kind of conduit.
Yeah.
For advising them and stuff. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
So I'm trying to review all the tax strategies and talk to people who are experts in tax and all that kind of stuff to see where the strategies and where perhaps not the greatest word, but where are the loopholes, where are the advantages for different classes of investors.
Yeah, I owned an apartment in New York for quite a few years, and it was a really nice one in Midtown Manhattan, overlooking the ice rink in the Rockefeller Center. And so, as central as you can get, and just beautiful kind of penthouse apartment. But one of the things that I noticed, and it's quite different to what you're used to if you're coming from the Irish side, is the monthly service charge. In Ireland, it's, people pay kind of an annual service charge. This was, I think, $850 a month or something like that. And I can remember, and then on top of that, there was air conditioning, servicing fees, and all of these things. And it was kind of the monthly outgoings were kind of on a par with what your rent would be collecting in Ireland on a similar kind of size apartment. So it was really quite interesting. How do you find it? Being there, you're in an apartment now in New York, and it's your own place. What's it like living there now compared to what
I love it. We're in East Village. We've got restaurants and bars everywhere we look. When we walk outside, there's such energy to the city. Like I get energy from living in the city. I grew up just on the foothills of the Dublin Mountains, so that's where my parents' house is. But I get energy from being in the city. Like I can go back and relax in my parents' house, but I get the energy and motivation from being in the city and being around a lot of people. And I think you can meet lots of different people and lots of different interesting people, and I get energy off that.
I actually think that's one of the things that people talk about. After the pandemic and stuff like that, people are all going to move to the countryside and work remotely. But I think there's a natural kind of a draw to the energy that you're talking about in a city, especially somewhere like New York. I lived in London as well for a few years, and that's got a similar kind of an energy to it. Just big city energy, as I suppose you could call it.
I think people forget all the benefits that cities have, like from an educational point of view, from like if you're single and dating, it's very hard to do that in the country. And like from going to cinemas, theaters, bars, restaurants, all of these things are part of life, and if you can't enjoy them, it's quite difficult. And I suppose one thing actually, which is slightly on the kind of sad side as well, like one of the reasons we've decided to stay here for another year is my wife has had two miscarriages, so we are now in a city that has the best
medical facilities.
best medical facilities, and we have seen it from an Irish point of view and from a New York point of view. And we are like, it's hands down, this city has far better services and far better access to medical professionals. So we were like, if we want to get the best, this is where we have to stay. And that's an important factor, I think, for some people in terms of deciding where they stay or where they live from a city point of view. Being close to healthcare is kind
major
of
factor. Yeah.
Like if you're in the middle of nowhere down the country, you're miles away from any good healthcare. Like, and it's not sustainable to have good healthcare everywhere. And realistically, these big cities are the places to go.
Yeah. Although there is a cost to. I mean, New York is known for being kind of an expensive city to live, and so there is that aspect of it.
It's an extremely expensive city to live in. Yeah.
Yeah. And my brother lived there for 10 years, so I'm very familiar with New York. I used to be over, twice or three times a year and stay with him. He had a place. He bought a place in Hoboken in New Jersey. Yeah. Yeah. And he used to just take the boat across to the lower tip of Manhattan every morning for work. And great city, all right. Yeah, what a buzz.
Yeah, that's only a 10-minute ferry drive as well. Like, so, like, I don't understand. Like, Hoboken has come up a huge amount in the last few years, but like, I still see it as a great buy even now compared to city prices because it's so close. Like 10 minutes on the ferry, like, is nothing. Like.
Yeah, it's true. So I want to change gear a little bit and talk about your social media presence, and in particular your YouTube presence. And it's funny because I think that's actually how I came across you. I found your video on talking about the Irish market and things like that. And it's an area that I've always been interested in YouTube and building a kind of an audience on YouTube. So tell us what that has been like for you and what it's done for your business, if anything.
So what has it done for my business, or what I suppose getting back to why I started it and that kind of stuff. So I think when I went out on my own, like and set up Fleming Real Estate, I did set up the social media accounts. I set up a Facebook page, Instagram, and YouTube. I kind of let them all just sit there for a long time. Didn't do a huge amount with them. Then I started to get more involved with the Instagram, posting a lot more on Instagram, posting short videos, and they started to get a decent amount of traction. And I kind of felt, maybe, I think it was the end of 2019, I kind of made a decision in December. I was like, I'm going to start using this YouTube channel and start putting out more videos. So it kind of tied into when the lockdown was actually starting, but I had made a conscious decision a few months beforehand that I was going to start putting out more videos. So it tied in with the lockdown, and a lot of people were at home at that time. There was more people watching YouTube. So the channel kind of took off a little bit, and people started watching these videos. And I've got a very good subscriber base in terms of like what's there. It's mainly Irish, but 70% of them are Irish, and a huge amount are return viewers all the time. So when people reach out to you, I think from a business point of view, if they do reach out to you, which a lot of people do, they already know you. And when they pick up their phone or they send you an email, they always say, I watched your videos on YouTube, lots of great information. I want to buy X, or I am thinking about selling Y, or whatever it is. And it's not like you have to go out and
hard sell. Yeah.
No, they've already decided to go with you. Sadly enough, in the last year, I haven't really been able to benefit massively from it because I've been in New York, and I have turned down a lot of work just because I felt that it wasn't the right thing for me to do if I wasn't going to be able to. I did take on a kind of an assistant to help me with some stuff that was ongoing and some stuff that was there, but I didn't think it was appropriate for me to keep taking loads of work on if I wasn't going to be the person who was dealing with it all the time. So, but I kind of see YouTube as a long-term investment and part of that kind of long-term building the brand. So as it grows and grows, like I am getting more and more emails in, I'm getting more messages in. I'd kind of say that I'd say to be fair, about 70% of the messages I do get in are from people who are looking to either get involved in real estate, to work in real estate, or are people who are thinking about how to start investing, rather than someone who's actually looking to sell or actually ready to buy. But there's still a decent amount of leads coming through from just people who are looking to buy and sell. So it's definitely worth doing. I would say, like, I could easily turn around here and say every agent should be doing it. Every agent should be doing YouTube, and most agencies have some sort of YouTube channel or promoting their properties or whatever. But it's much easier for someone like me who's works for myself, doesn't have to report into anyone, and can say what I want to say. And similar to you, with your podcast, you can say and do what you want to do because you work for yourself. And if you look at anyone who's putting out a lot of content in Ireland, particularly, they're their own boss and they can say what they want. They're not hamstrung by a corporation or a larger brand that they might lose their job if they said something wrong on a YouTube channel, or not concerned about their future in terms of going into an interview later on and saying, well, you came across and said this on your YouTube channel, that's not right, that's not perhaps our brand. And I understand why more people don't do it in Ireland. Whereas if you look at America, everyone seems to be on social media and every agent seems to be on YouTube and have their own channel. And that is because they're all self-employed and they can do what they want. They do work for brokerages and they do work under a brokerage, and there will be some brand kind of element to it, but they are ultimately self-employed and they can move around brokerages very easy. So they have a lot more freedom in terms of what they can say. So when you're not really comparing to or like with like, so it's understandable why agents in Ireland aren't quite as active on kind of social media.
I think the person who stands out in my mind most active in this space in the real estate agency is obviously Ryan Serhant, and he's gone from being a guy that appeared on a TV show to doing something like 2 billion worth of sales through his new company that he set up during lockdown. So it just shows you how building a brand online and all that kind of stuff, it is actually a valid strategy. A lot of people kind of poo-poo it because they find it hard to speak to a camera or something like that, and it puts them off. But it really does open doors. And as you say, people approach you and they already have decided that they know, like, and trust you. Yeah. And so there's no convincing them otherwise. It's they've already made up their mind that you're the guy that they want to talk to.
And not everyone's going to like your YouTube videos, but you can't be everyone, and not everyone can be your client either. So you can't please everyone.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of polarization as well. Like, you're going to have people. My TikTok, I have, I get a lot of comments that are of a negative nature, like, and because I'll come out and I'll say something and I don't give it a huge amount of thought. It's kind of like, just off the top of my head, and people will come back and tell me that I'm, wrong over some specific detail, and they really kind of attack sometimes. But I find what's funny about it is that the more attacks you get, the greater the engagement, and so the video is viral and you end up with more followers.
Yeah, so it's I think, like, I suppose my strategy for YouTube is definitely, it's a long-term thing. I mentioned to you before that I went off TikTok because it was too much of a time drain for myself. I was just into it and watching too many videos. So I decided to go off it a little bit. I did go onto Twitter when I came over to America, just to kind of stay in touch a little bit more with the opinions in Ireland. And I kind of feel like I deleted the app last night because it was just like, it's just too negative and I just don't want to
time suck again. Yeah,
time sucking, and don't want this negativity entering my space anymore. But I'm very much kind of, while I have like a decent Instagram following and stuff like that, I don't see a huge amount of kind of value in that, if that makes sense.
It's more vanity than business leads. Yeah,
I don't mind doing it because actually I find it a really good way to connect with people. Some people use LinkedIn to connect with people, but I actually find, like, particularly what's helped me in New York is just following certain hashtags with New York real estate or whatever, following one or two of the accounts, and as they post stuff, going, okay, well, that's something I'm interested in as well. And then if that kind of continues, then I can reach out to them and go, well, I'm actually interested in this as well. Can we meet for coffee or whatever? So I've used it for that. I also used the Instagram for, like, just staying in touch with like friends easier, because when they post a video, you can just comment on it, and it's a way easier way to stay. And like I follow a lot of like clients and stuff like that, so I find Instagram is really good for that. But realistically, YouTube I see as a long term. That is where I see the value to put more and more kind of content behind, and more of my research behind, because even if I do put a lot of time and effort into it for the next year or two, I see that as building a long-term brand, and it's a long-term investment for me.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time that goes into it. It may not be for everyone. Like other agents may feel that like, actually I'm way better off just growing my network on the ground personally, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different way of doing it.
Changing gears again, Shane, I'm just thinking about, when we started this conversation, you were talking about, as a young lad, you were very interested in development and stuff like that. Are you tempted to go down that road now professionally and start developing, or investing in your own right rather than as an agent?
I am, and I think whenever I do like kind of a coaching session or anything like that with someone, I think that's what always comes out, going, yeah, that's really where I should be spending my time and focusing on. Like when I came out of college and when I went to go on my own, developing wasn't that complex. I could get my head around it from like 2 or 3 years working in Tesco doing major developments. I could get my head around what was involved, and seeing aside from acquisition all the way through. Now it has got so much more complex, and it kind of scares me a little bit in terms of how complex it is. And while I think I prefer to get more involved in kind of the retrofit aside, or the redevelopment of stuff, rather than straight development, is probably where I'm trying to asset manage certain assets in terms of adding value through planning permissions or through
just active management. Yeah,
active asset management probably attracts me a little bit more at this stage. But that active management could involve like adding a floor or two to a building if that was an option and stuff like that. So that's the kind of, rather than straightforward brownfield sites all the way up or greenfield sites all the way up. I think it's more the seeing value in something that's sitting there and needs to be asset managed properly. So, and I kind of feel like that's the direction I want to go towards in the long term. I'm trying to move myself that direction and force myself down that road.
Interesting. Shane, I'm conscious of time. Tell us the best advice you ever got.
Best advice I ever got. That's a hard one.
And did you take it? That's the next question.
I probably didn't take it. I think like the best advice that I probably didn't take was get a mentor. I don't like nearly 40 now, and I've never had a mentor. That might be down to my own stubbornness and my own kind of thinking that I can do everything myself. But I think that is something that I regret not doing. And I probably, even now, I'm looking at it now, going, actually, I still probably need to find a mentor and get myself moving. And I think that probably is the best advice that I didn't take, was go get a mentor.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Like during the 2007-8 kind of period when everything was going crazy, like with valuations and stuff, like I was making a huge amount of money. And if I just had someone in my corner tapping me on the shoulder and saying, Gavin, this is not going to last. Like, this is, start putting some of that stuff away, pay down some debt, and I was kind of like doubling up again, going again and things like this. And just a mentor who could kind of had your best interests would have kind of maybe held me back and saved me from some of that pain,
Yeah, definitely. Like I think in 2007-ish, or I'd come out of college in 2005, and like saving was just, I didn't even need to think about saving. One, if you wanted a mortgage, you get it at 100%. So you didn't need to save for a deposit.
Yeah.
So saving wasn't an option. And my salary was increasing like by multiples every like 6 months to a year. So I was like, there's no point in me saving this. In 6 months' time, I'm going to be paid twice as much. So like, it was just, it was crazy back then. So you would look back and go, yeah, you should have saved a lot of that. But you probably would have spent it on something else.
It's true. All right, Shane. Well, look, thanks so much for your time. Tell us if people, actually, my one final question, and if you're a listener to the podcast, what advice would you give yourself now, your young self, the young Shane Fleming who was kind of coming out of college? What advice would you give yourself looking back now, knowing what you know?
I think it probably, like, obviously getting away from the saving point of view, because like everyone says saving the best, but I think it kind of probably is in a little bit in line in regards to the mentor side of stuff, but more probably detailed than that, or more probably kind of relevant to lots of other people, would be very careful who your bosses are. Pick actual leaders, not managers. Pick a leader that you can learn from a leading point of view rather than a manager. And I think that's important, particularly in your early career. I learned loads in my early career because I had a great boss, or great manager or leader. But perhaps I didn't, over my years, I may not have always had the best manager or leader. And I think that is something that people should always, when they're picking a job, perhaps pick a leader over money.
That's actually a great bit of advice. That's the first time someone's actually said that. But now thinking back in my own circumstances, my first job, I just had a fantastic boss, and he was so helpful and guiding me and all that kind of stuff. And then I had other jobs where, they weren't particularly good and you didn't really learn anything, and you're kind of just biding your time before the next job. Interesting. Shane, where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Well, I'm on Instagram and YouTube. So Instagram is Fleming Real Estate, and YouTube is Fleming Real Estate Property Agents, I think it is. But Fleming Real Estate, if you're searching in Dublin, you probably should find me on YouTube or Instagram pretty easily.
Great stuff.
You can find me, yeah.
All right, Shane. Look, thanks so much for your time, and look forward to talking to you again.
No problem. Thanks a million.
Hey guys, it's me again. Just a quick couple of things before you go. Please take a moment to leave a review over on iTunes or whichever platform you do happen to listen to this podcast on. If it happens to be YouTube, then maybe give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. If you have any questions, or if you have a topic that you think I should cover in future episodes, then please do reach out, DM me, or leave a comment below if you're looking on the YouTube video. But I'd just love to know if there's anything that you think I should kind of get stuck into as a topic or a subject. You can also connect with me via my Facebook group, which is called Behind the Facade Community. And if you're not on Facebook or whatever, you can reach me on the other social media platforms. You can DM me there. My handle is Gavin J. Gallagher, all one word. The J is important. There is lots of other Gavin Gallaghers out there. You can also join my tribe, and that is just head over to my website, gavinjgallagher.com, and sign up there, and you can get like an email, stay up to date in various projects I'm working on and stuff. All right, look guys, that's the show. Wishing you an awesome week, and I'll see you back here next week.